Dobro. History. Archive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a story that, well, on the surface, it feels like this heartbreaking tragedy of silence.
It really does.
But when you start to go through the source material, you realize it's something else entirely. It's a strategic masterpiece.
Yeah.
A calculated final act of defiance.
We are examining the last 21 months of Freddie Mercury's life. And our sources, we're talking biographies, documentary footage, firsthand accounts from his inner circle. They all paint this picture of a two-front war.
A two-front war. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. On one side, you have this incredibly private, intense battle against his AIDS diagnosis and this furious drive to create music.
And then on the other,
the relentless, brutal hounding by the press.
So the date that everyone remembers is November 24th, 1991. It's 6:48 p.m. and Farrokh Bulsara, who the world knew and adored as Freddie Mercury. He passes away. He's 45.
And of course, the world was shocked. But the real jolt, the moment that defines this whole story, actually happened about 24 hours before that.
Right. Because for years, the speculation had been, well, it was just constant. It was vicious. The British press especially were running this open death watch.
They really were. And then, on November 23rd, just hours before he died, a statement is released from Freddie, finally confirming he was HIV positive and had AIDS.
And that's the core question of this whole deep dive, isn't it? He fought for years to keep that rumor private. So why, after all that pain, all that secrecy, why confirm the truth at the absolute final minute?
Well, our mission here is to dissect that exact question. Because the sources make one thing incredibly clear. This was not a confession. It wasn't a surrender.
No.
It was his last great performance, his final act of showmanship. It was, in effect, a strategic checkmate against the very people who had been tormenting him.
And to really get the genius of that move, we can't just look at the final day. We have to go back. We have to trace the battle between his private struggle in the studio and that public spectacle the media was creating.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with the strategy itself, the 24-hour strategy. The setting for this is Garden Lodge, his home.
His sanctuary in Kensington, this beautiful mansion that was supposed to be his escape, filled with his cats, his art.
But by late 1991, it had become something else. The sources describe it almost as a fortress or even a prison. It was designed to keep the world out because the paparazzis were just relentless.
And inside that fortress, the final act is playing out. You have to remember, he'd been diagnosed back in 1987.
4 years.
4 incredibly long years of living with this secret while still somehow projecting this superhuman energy into his recordings. It's just, it's mind-boggling.
So we get to that decision point. It's Friday, November 22nd, 1991. Freddie knows the end is very, very near.
And the sources are clear on this. This was not some emotional last-minute decision. This feels like the execution of a plan that he'd had in his back pocket for a long time.
He makes a call.
He calls his manager, Jim Beach, the one person he trusts to execute this perfectly.
And the conversation is, by all accounts, very short, very direct.
Freddie just says, it's time. Time for the statement to go out. And with that one decision, he completely flips the power dynamic.
How so?
Because he's making the announcement. It's on his terms, in his words, at his chosen moment. He's not letting his death be the thing that breaks the story. He is.
And the statement itself goes out just after midnight. So as Friday becomes Saturday, November 23rd, the impact was immediate.
Oh, absolutely seismic. And it's so concise, it just cuts through years of noise and speculation. It says, following the enormous conjecture in the press, I wish to confirm that I have been tested HIV positive and have AIDS.
He also addresses the secrecy, which is crucial.
Yes. He immediately says he kept it private in order to protect the privacy of those around me. He frames the silence not as shame, but as an act of protection.
And we have to just stop and really think about the timing here. By the time that statement is hitting the wire services, by the time the world is reading it, what's his physical state?
It's extreme. The accounts from people who were there, like his partner Jim Hutton and his assistant Peter Freestone, they tell us he was already drifting in and out of consciousness.
He's lost his sight.
He'd lost his sight. He could barely move. This wasn't a statement delivered from a place of strength. This was delivered from the absolute brink. The words hit the world, and less than 24 hours later, he's gone.
So let's really dig into the strategic why. Why say anything at all? If you're that close to the end, why not just let it be?
Because Freddie Mercury understood the British tabloids better than anyone. He knew with absolute certainty that if he died in silence, they would own his story forever.
They would have hijacked the narrative completely.
Completely, and his legacy would have been defined by their speculation, their salacious, homophobic, and just plain inaccurate stories would have become the official version of his death.
By getting his statement out 24 hours beforehand, he guaranteed that when the news of his death broke,
the first thing everyone reported was his statement, his words, his reason for the silence. He controlled the headline. He died a man who had confirmed his illness on his own terms to protect his friends, not a victim the press had finally exposed.
And it also protected the music, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If he'd announced this in, say, 1989,
it would have been a catastrophe for the work.
every single note recorded after that would have been viewed through the lens of pity or death. The Innuendo album would have been seen as the AIDS album.
Exactly. And the posthumous work, Made in Heaven, would have been viewed with such suspicion. People would have cried exploitation. By waiting, he ensured the art was judged as art, pure and simple. The integrity of the music was preserved.
There's also the personal cost he avoided. By not announcing earlier, he refused to become a poster child.
Yes. He would have instantly stopped being Freddie Mercury, the Ross god, and become Freddie Mercury, the AIDS victim. That was a role he would never, ever have accepted.
This is 24-hour strategy. It's like a shield. It insulated him completely.
It did. It starved the press of the years-long death watch they were desperate for. It protected his inner circle from constant harassment. And in the end, it meant he died a king, not a case study.
A stunning victory.
A total victory in a battle he knew he couldn't physically win.
To really get the sheer necessity of that strategy, you have to understand the world he was living in, the level of viciousness.
It was a different era, and the public confirmation of his decline, it really starts at one specific event.
The Brit Awards, February 18th, 1990.
That's the one. Queen is there to accept the award for outstanding contribution to British music. And up to this point, it's all been rumors, blurry photos. But the Brits made it impossible to deny.
Yeah, because you have to picture the Freddie everyone knew. The flamboyant, high-energy showman, the master of the stage.
And then you look at the footage from that night. The sources describe him as a ghost of his stage persona. He's visibly, shockingly thinner, gaunt even.
And his whole demeanor is different. He's wearing a simple suit, not leather and sequins. He hangs back, letting Brian May do most of the talking. For Freddie Mercury, that's a huge signal.
A massive signal. And then comes the very end, the last time his voice would ever be heard live in a public setting.
He just steps up to the microphone, says 3 words.
Thank you. Good night. And that's it. It's quiet. It's final.
And that visual, that moment, that was all the fuel that tabloids needed. The whispers just became a roar.
The hounding started in earnest right then, and it culminated really on November 15th, 1990. That's the date the Sun ran that infamous full-page photo.
The sad face of Freddie Mercury.
That's the one. It was taken without his knowledge, and it officially kicked off the media's public death watch. It was just ghoulish.
And we have to place this in the context of the AIDS crisis at the time. This wasn't just a disease. It carried this terrible, crippling stigma.
Oh, the ignorance was profound. And it was laced with so much homophobia. You had major publications calling it the gay plague or gay cancer. It was seen by many not as a health crisis, but as some kind of moral failing.
But the cruelty was just, it's hard to comprehend now. James Rogan, we directed a documentary on this. He talked about going through the press archives from that time.
And he was horrified. He found a headline, a real headline in a British paper that read, "I'd shoot my son if he had AIDS."
Just let that sink in.
That's the level of hatred and fear that was being directed at him personally every single day. So when you understand that, his silence starts to look very different.
It's not shame, it's a shield.
It's a shield. He's protecting himself and the people he loves from that.
And it literally turned his home into a prison. The sources talk about paparazzi going to these extreme lengths.
It's heartbreaking. There are accounts that even in his final days when he was lying in bed, he could see the cigarette smoke from the photographers rising up over his garden wall.
There was no escape.
No escape. Brian May said the papers just made stuff up because they couldn't get real information. Roger Taylor just called them vultures.
So when you put it all together, his silence wasn't passive. It wasn't him hiding.
No. It was an active, defiant refusal. He was refusing to participate in his own public execution. He was saying, "You will not get this. You will not own my suffering. You will not define my last days." It was his ultimate act of control.
So after the Brits in 1990, he essentially retired from the public eye. But he did give the world one last, very carefully crafted look at himself.
One final artistic statement, and that was the music video for These Are the Days of Our Lives, filmed in May of 1991.
And this video it's a masterclass in concealment and confession all at once.
It really is. The song itself is very nostalgic looking back, but the first thing you notice when you watch the video is that it's shot entirely in black and white.
At the time, people just assumed it was, an artistic choice, a nod to old Hollywood, maybe.
Right. But the director, Rudy Dolezal, he later confirmed the real reason. And it's much more pragmatic and heartbreaking. He said the black and white was a desperate attempt to conceal Mercury's physical deterioration.
It was a medical necessity, basically.
It was. Dolezal said the color footage was unusable. It showed how emaciated Freddie had become, and it also showed the physical markers of the disease.
The Kaposi's sarcoma lesions.
Exactly. These visible red and purple lesions on his skin. They had to cake on makeup to try and hide them. There was even a large one in his eye. In color, you couldn't miss it.
So they were literally using the technology of film, the lighting, the angles, the lack of color, to edit the disease out of the frame.
They were fighting reality to give him one last moment of the glamour he embodied. One last moment of being Freddie, the icon, not Freddie, the patient.
But even with all that concealment, he still finds a way to confess.
Yeah.
To say a real goodbye.
He does, and it comes right at the very end of the video, the last few seconds.
You see him wearing this vest, and it's painted with pictures of his cats.
A little personal touch, a piece of his real life at Garden Lodge making its way onto the screen.
And then he summons all the energy he has left, and he looks straight down the barrel of the camera.
A look of such intensity. And he whispers,
I still love you.
I still love you. He gives a little smile, and then he just walks out of the frame and out of public life forever.
The director, Dolezal, he said this was absolutely planned. This was Freddie's chosen artistic exit. He was saying goodbye to his fans on his own terms.
It's just staggering, isn't it? In the middle of all this hatred and speculation being thrown at him, his final public act, his last word to the world, it's just pure, simple love.
He turned all that poison into something beautiful.
So while the press was busy painting him as this tragic recluse hiding away from the world,
the reality was the complete opposite. He wasn't hiding. He was working furiously.
His seclusion was just a cover story for what was one of the most creatively intense periods of his entire life.
And the heart of that operation was in Montreux, Switzerland.
At the band's studio there, Brian May described it as a cocoon that they all built around Freddie. It was the one place he could escape, the one place where he wasn't a patient, he was just a musician.
And inside that cocoon, he gives a band an order, a mission. And this piece of testimony from Brian May, it reveals everything about his mindset.
It really does. May recalls Freddie telling them, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was essentially, keep writing for me, write me stuff. I know I don't have long, just give me words, give me melodies, and I will sing them.
And then he adds, and then you can do what you like with it afterwards. Finish it off.
That is the core of his legacy strategy right there. He knew his body was failing, but his voice, that incredible instrument, was still there, even if only for short bursts.
So he wasn't just recording the next album, Innuendo.
No, he was doing something much more radical. He was consciously, deliberately creating an archive, a toolkit of his own voice for his bandmates to assemble after he was gone.
I mean, the foresight that takes. To be working not for a current project, but for a posthumous one, knowing you will never see it finished.
It's almost unbelievable. And the process itself was a race against the clock. They keep the studio ready around the clock. If Freddie had a good hour, a window of strength, they'd rush in and just capture vocals.
Just the vocals.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
They'd focus on getting that perfect vocal takedown, and Brian and the others would build the instrumental tracks around it later.
Yeah.
It's all about maximizing his energy.
And Brian May said that this work, it was the one thing that made him smile. In the studio, he wasn't dying. He was creating. The disease was sort of left outside the door.
And that connection between the work and his life force, it's made crystal clear by his assistant, Peter Freestone.
What did he say?
Freestone confirmed that Freddie's life was so defined by his ability to create that he only really realized his life was over when he physically couldn't record anymore. That was the finish line. The moment he couldn't stand at the microphone and add another piece to the vault, that's when the mission was over. And that, Freestone says, is when he decided to stop taking his medication.
The work wasn't just part of his life.
The work was his life. When the work ended, he let his life end.
And that race against time in Montreux produced some of the most powerful music of Queen's career. And also gave us two sort of defining stories.
It did. You get the legend, and then you get the quiet reality.
Let's start with the legend. The recording of The Show Must Go On.
I mean, if you had to pick one song to summarize his defiance, this is it. It's the ultimate anthem from a dying artist.
The vocal line Brian May wrote for it is it's brutal. It's so high, so powerful. It would have been a challenge for Freddie, even at his peak.
And May was genuinely worried. He told Freddie, "I don't know if this is going to be possible to sing." And you have to remember, on this particular day, Freddie was in a really bad way.
The sources say he was having trouble even walking. He was in a lot of pain.
A lot of pain. He comes into the studio, props himself up on the mixing desk, looks at Brian May, and says that immortal line,
"I'll fucking do it, darling."
the ultimate showman. And then he says, "Bring me the vodka."
Right. The famous vodka story.
Knocks back a couple of shots, gets himself ready, and then just goes for it.
And Brian May's description of what happened next is incredible. He said Freddie went in and completely lacerated that vocal, that he found a place in his voice he'd never even reached before.
It's like he channeled all the pain, all the defiance into that one performance. It's a masterpiece born from agony, and that's the legend, right? The vodka-fueled roar of defiance.
But that's not the whole story.
No, that's not his actual final recording. The real final session is much quieter, much more poignant.
We're talking about the song Mother Love. This was recorded in May 1991, a bit after the main Innuendo sessions.
And by this point, he was so weak he couldn't sing a whole song in one go. The process had to be broken down piece by piece.
How did they do it?
Brian May would literally write out the lyrics for one line at a time on scraps of paper. They'd do 3 takes of that single line, trying to get the perfect one, and then Freddie would have to rest before they could do the next.
Just painstaking.
Incredibly. And they worked like this all day, just inching their way through the song.
Until they got to the final verse.
And he was just spent. There was nothing left in the tank. The vocal archive was now full. His final words in a recording studio.
He just said, "I'm not up to this. I need to go away and have rest. I'll come back and finish it off."
As Brian May said, so heartbreakingly, he never came back.
That was it. The race was over. Brian May ended up having to sing that final verse himself.
And that contrast between the roar of "the show must go on" and the final whisper of "mother love," that gives you the complete picture. The legend and the man.
Which brings us back full circle. Back to Garden Lodge, the final hours.
The race is run, the artistic work is done, that incredible archive of vocals is safe in the vault, ready to become the Made in Heaven album. The music is finally safe from the press.
And so, the shield can finally be lowered. The strategic silence that protected him for 4 years is no longer needed.
On November 23rd, the statement goes out. He takes control of his own story for the last time. And then he can finally rest.
And the beauty of it is, the story of his final hours remains his. The press got nothing. They were left outside the walls with only his dignified statement to report on.
While inside, he was surrounded by the people he chose, the people he loved. His partner, Jim Hutton, his lifelong friend, Mary Austin, Peter Freestone, Dave Clark. He died surrounded by love, not by camera flashes.
In Jim Hutton's account of that final morning, November 24th, it's just so intimate.
It is. He wrote that Freddie stirred very early in the morning, incredibly weak.
And he whispered a question.
He whispered, "Do you love you?"
And that was it, the final private exchange. Later that evening at 6:48 p.m., he was gone.
But when you look at the whole story, those 21 months, it doesn't feel like a tragedy in the end. It feels like a triumph. It absolutely does. His death wasn't a defeat. It was a victory, won on his own terms through sheer force of will.
He refused to be a victim of the press. He refused to be a victim of the stigma, and he refused to let the disease have the final say on his art.
He used every last ounce of his energy to create, to build his own future. He died a legend, not just for the music he made when he was healthy, but for the way he fought to keep making it right up until his very last breath.
He took imminent death, threw a couple of shots of vodka at it, and orchestrated a final 24-hour masterpiece that secured his legacy forever.
So when we finish this deep dive, it's clear. Freddie Mercury's death wasn't a tragedy of silence. It was a masterwork of narrative control. The sources all point to the same conclusion. His art, his legacy, completely triumphed over the cruelty of the media.
That final 24-hour statement wasn't a footnote. It was the final artistic decision of his life. It guaranteed that the world would remember his battle in his words, not theirs.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this? We've seen how Freddie used his last moments not just to endure, but to proactively build his future, creating that incredible archive of vocals.
It really makes you think about the power you have to define your own story, even when you're facing something completely overwhelming, when you feel like you have no control at all.
Freddie Mercury showed the world what it means to seize control of your narrative. And it leaves us with this final thought. What does it take not just to sing "The Show Must Go On," but to have the foresight and the sheer willpower to plan for the show to continue long after you've left the stage?